What we're going to do is we're going to focus on four things today. A little bit around the recovery plan that was launched this week. We've got Subra on as well. It's going to give us a quick update on the weekly business monitor. That's an important piece of research just around what the economy in Greater Manchester is doing at the present moment in time. We've got Rita and Lucy then from membership to give a quick update from that team. And we've also got Susanna as well from our international trade team to just give us the latest news from there. So I'm going to start off first of all with a very brief update on some of the policy and campaign work we've been doing. If you saw the brief yesterday, you'll have seen that we've released our recovery plan for coming out of COVID-19, and that's called The Way Forward. And in that, we've described a series of discussion points and position points we think will be needed as we move through the next phase of the pandemic. And again, it's interesting when you say it's a recovery phase, because we may be heading into very, very, very tough economic conditions going forward. So is that recovery? Maybe. It may be a health recovery, but certainly there could be some long-term damage to the economy. One of the important things we do want to do with this is make sure that we engage with as many people as possible. The themes in the recovery plan cover things around transport, health, the economy, and also our community as well, which we feel is very important, especially when you look at what the impact of, for example, increasing unemployment could well be. So we've got four themes there, and basically we're looking for members, businesses, you may not have to be a chamber member or whatever, to get involved and help us with that work, to let us know what you want and what you think the next stage of this should look like, and then we can work on that and then take that and present it to government, whether that's at a local level with the Mayor's office or whether we need to take that up to a national level. So we've already done a lot of work. Our survey work, which Subra will explain a little bit more about in a minute, helps us with that. If there's anything, if you have a look at the plan, we'll circulate it afterwards to you. If there's any way that you want to get involved with that, then please let me know and we can look at setting you up with one of our task groups that we're setting up. And again, behind the task groups, I don't want them to be huge, great big onerous things that there's regular meetings every day on or anything like that. They will be quite brief, but I think it's so important that we represent the voice of the Greater Manchester business community within the work that we actually do. So please drop me a line if you're interested in anything like that. And that is tending to be the main bulk of our effort and focus currently, as we look at ways of making sure we come out of this successfully, safe, and we don't have that long-term economic damage as deep as it could be. We want to make sure we remain strong throughout the next 6 months or so. So that's my bit really about the way forward. What I want to do now is just hand over to Subra, who's going to say a little piece around the weekly business monitor. Subra, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. I hope everyone can see my screen. For those of you who are here, good afternoon. And this is the latest update based on the most recent data from our weekly surveys. If you did attend the presentation at Assembly a few days ago, then you're going to find some overlap with this. However, I'm focusing on a couple of different issues this afternoon. So what we did was, because the COVID-19 pandemic was pretty fast moving, initially we didn't have a lockdown, then we had a lockdown, and now we are moving towards a relaxation of the lockdown. It was very important for us to understand what's actually happening with businesses here in Greater Manchester. That was the reason for starting this survey, and we looked into key economic indicators such as customer demand, changes to workforce, especially with the furlough scheme being so successful, cash flow positions which have been adversely affected, and so on. But equally important is this issue of business confidence. So when there is so much uncertainty, are businesses at the moment willing to invest in training, making further capital expenditure, and so on. And then we also looked into what factors are worrying businesses at the moment, and then take up of support measures which have been announced by government. So I just want to focus on demand, because this is an extremely important thing. And as has been confirmed by the 6-7 weeks of data that we have gathered, there has been this historic crash in customer demand. That has affected both B2C customers, that those were the sectors that were initially affected, with restaurants, bars, pubs, etc., having to close down, shops closed, hairdressers closed, and so on. So any business situation that requires close human contact has had to be closed down. And so that's the interesting thing here, which is that we have this historic crash in customer demand, but this is quite different from what we have experienced in previous recessions, such as 2008, 2009, or the late 90s, and so on. And the reason the current situation is different is because there has been a forced stoppage of supply side activities. The reason we can't go and eat out is not because we do not want to, but because restaurants have had to be closed down. The reason you can't visit hairdressers is because those types of businesses have had to be closed down. And that's an important issue here. So we had that historic crash down to the -80s, which is the lowest we have ever recorded. It has since then improved. So it is now standing at somewhere near -50. So the key important bit here is this zero line. Anything below zero indicates that things are still contracting rather than there being growth. When what has happened in the data subsequent to the first couple of weeks is that the number of stay same responses have gone up. So businesses aren't saying that demand is in free fall. What they are saying is, once it has crashed to historic lows, there isn't much more room for it to decrease further. So, and that indicates that there has been a plateauing at the low levels. And when will we see customer demand come back? I think that will require consumer confidence to be restored, but it will also mean that businesses will have to reopen in a safe and compliant environment. Okay, so what are the key factors which are worrying businesses? No surprises here. By far, the single most important concern is reduced volume of business and reduced revenues. Cash flow concerns are the second biggest concern for most businesses, but there are some other interesting numbers as well. The data that we have gathered so far in the Business Monitor is evidence that there have not been large-scale job losses in Greater Manchester or elsewhere in the country. So 8.6 million people across the country are now on furlough. In Greater Manchester, that number is around 335,000 out of a 1.3 million workforce. But the concern is what happens if there is a prolonged lockdown, and what if consumer confidence cannot be restored? And that's when concerns around laying off of staff will come. But at the same time, there are also lots of businesses which do not have the ability to work remotely. And so the adoption of technology, etc., is going to be critical for the future so that businesses become a bit more resilient. And also we have some solutions to improving productivity. That's the bad news. Is there any good news? And it would seem that there is some good news. Now, you would all be aware that the government issued some guidelines, and Chris referred to these guidelines earlier in his piece. So these have been issued for individual sectors, essentially to encourage them and help them reopen office spaces, etc., in a safe manner. And it would seem that the majority, over 80% of businesses are indeed aware of the guidance. I did have some follow-up questions in the survey. So roughly 80% of the businesses also reported that they are able to implement the guidelines and reopen in a partial manner. Now, clearly, if you have to implement a 2-meter social distancing requirement, you cannot return to full capacity. You would have to resume with 50% capacity or 60% capacity and so on. And there are other important issues that play into it, such as the availability of sufficient capacity in public transportation. But the fact that there is a very high level of awareness and the fact that businesses are saying that they are able to implement the guidance offers a good starting point to resume normal business activities, and hopefully before the end of this calendar year, we will have returned to pre-pandemic levels. What is the overall economic contraction at this stage? A short-term downturn cannot be averted. And it is very clear that has already happened. There has been a significant increase in the number of claimants for universal credit. There has been a significant increase in the number of self-employed people, etc., who are saying that they actually do not have the business volumes to sustain trading. But this is a public health crisis. And in this crisis, one of the key concerns has been this issue of, do we save lives or do we save livelihoods? And I think that offers a false dilemma that does not offer us the correct choices. And what we want is to ensure that livelihoods are safeguarded in a safe manner that also protects lives. That's my piece. If you have any other questions about the data, I'll try to answer them. But for now, I will hand over back to Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Subra. And it's so important. If you haven't yet completed the Business Monitor, please do so. We publish it every 3 times every week in the brief, and you should obviously have follow-on emails as well. If you've not seen it yet, please do so. And again, we'll send this out after the meeting. It's so vital, especially this time around, that we get that information from you and we can present it to people as plans are being formulated as to how we come out of the current crisis. What I want to do now is ask Lucy or Reet, or maybe both of them, to do a quick update on what's happening as regards membership and give us an overview about some of the key services at the present moment in time. So over to you.
Thanks, Chris. It'll just be myself giving an update. So my name's Reet and part of the membership team. Just going to give you a quick update on some of the membership services that you can access during this time. So the first one is Chamber Protect. This is powered by our patrons Quest. It's a specialist advice service and an online portal which covers HR, legal, health and safety, tax and VAT support. Many members will be familiar with this. It's part of your membership, so it's free access to the advice line and the online portal. But if you want to find out a little bit more about how you can access the details, feel free to touch base with me afterwards or touch base with your account manager. The next one is mediation. So as more sectors and parts of the economy reopen and restart, we understand it's a bit of a difficult time and the capacity of disputes may rise. So as part of our recovery plans for Greater Manchester business community and our chamber, we understand support is critical and we want business owners to be focusing on their business rather than getting tied down with lengthy disputes. So we've recently partnered with Paul Johnson, one of the UK's leading mediators of exchange chambers, to now deliver our mediation service online, so members can access this remotely and saving time, money and avoid going to court. And then lastly, as some of you may be aware, we've launched a free offering called Greater Manchester Business Community. We understand that we need to be there to support businesses outside in the wider area rather than just our members. So together we can rebuild, recover, and ensure that we build back better. The offering that businesses can access during the business community is things like access to our online network via LinkedIn. It gives you the opportunity to connect with other businesses during this time and network. Updates on the evolving situation 3 times a week through our e-newsletter, The Brief. Access to My GMCR, our app, which members can promote their offers and also connect digitally with other businesses. Access to our digital events and webinars. Access to any online training courses we're offering during this time. And lastly, access to any of international support trade services. All of this information can be found on our website, so if you want to go and have a browse, more than welcome. Or if you'd like to find out a little bit more about how you can access these services, just get in touch with myself or your account manager. Thank you. If you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll pass back to Chris. Oh, Chris, you're on mute.
Damn, nearly got away with it. Yeah, just saying thanks very much, Reet. And Lucy's just put a link into on the chat screen as well. It takes you directly to the membership benefits page as well to find out a little bit more detail about some of the services that Reet has outlined there. And again, as we're moving through this and coming out of that initial sort of shock stage and beginning to develop things, it's quite important now that we begin to sort of form that bit around, you know, what levels of support and what key areas of support do businesses actually need for what lies ahead and some of the challenges. And I think it's important that she mentioned the new the mediation service. We're right for some time, but we've just done a bit of a refresh on it. That could be very important over the next few months as obviously contracts and things begin to be rediscussed, renegotiated, etc. So a whole range of services there. for you to take advantage of. Last but not least, for our presentations from the team here today at the Chamber, we've got Susanna Cordoba, who's head of our International Trade Services. So, Susanna, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Is my slide showing? Just to make sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. Just to give you a quick overview of two major things that have happened in the last 2 weeks. The first one is the new launch of the UK global tariff, which is going to replace the European Common External Tariff once the transition period finishes at the end of this year. So unless there is any exceptions or we reach a trade agreement with Europe, this will be kicking off from the 1st of January. What is intended to do is basically to facilitate, obviously, trade and to ensure that we'll continue operating smoothly with our supply chain. So some of the developing countries will be, any imports coming from developing countries will be coming with less duty or no duty, unless they have, we have a special trade agreement with them. And there will be some relief or tariff suspension that's operated by the UK. Some of the key changes will include removing some tariffs on products that are, as I mentioned, used in UK production that are not made here in the UK or have been what they call a nuisance tariff below 2%. They also rounded up some tariffs and removed some of the complications around agricultural products to a single percentage. Another key change is the removal of the European measuring table of tariffs, which scraps a lot of the variations that were attached to some of the products. And basically, it's just making sure that our supply chain continue to operate smoothly after we exit the EU officially. Obviously, there are some provisions for products related to fighting coronavirus. And some of these are already in place now with some temporary zero tariffs for these products and VAT relief for PPE, medical devices, disinfectants coming from non-European countries. So this is very important. It's ensuring that around 60% of the trade that comes into the UK will be tariff-free under the WTO terms. But does not mean that it's not important for us to focus on reaching an agreement with the EU. And the last piece of news is that in the last 2 weeks, huge trade negotiations have started with the US and Japan. We'll focus particularly in the US because it's the third and fourth export and import partner for Greater Manchester. Just in 2018, we reached about 1,311 million worth of trade in goods, not to mention that it's our largest export market for services. It's very important how those negotiations are going because it will have a direct impact on our trade balance, especially for Greater Manchester. And Japan, less so. Our trade with Japan is only about 200 million, according to the ONS in 2018. But there is some room for growth in that market. Obviously, we'll have to consider some of the changes that will come after the pandemic. There will be some areas and sectors which will benefit from this trade agreement. These are some of the upcoming events that will have in the next few weeks. As you see, we're going to have a series of events focused on Europe and how to continue trading with our European partners post-pandemic. Some training courses that, of course, are also more geared to get you ready for what it will be to trade post-Brexit. So that's it for me. And yeah, I'll hand it over to Chris.
Okay, thanks very much, Susanna. I've managed to unmute myself there successfully. So that's something. We've got about 5 minutes left. So has anybody got any questions on anything that they've heard today with anything that any of us have discussed?
Chris, one of the things I'd like to raise is procurement is going to be crucial to getting the economy moving again in terms of raising business confidence and also getting contracts in place. One of the things that concerns me is the protracted procurement process around public sector procurement.
Yeah.
And I think one of the issues that I see is that it's very heavily weighted towards the large corporates, and it doesn't actually, because the actual process is so long-winded and so full of red tape, it doesn't help SMEs, and neither does it help to re-energize the economy. I mean, what's the view on that in terms of what we can do to encourage a change in some of the public sector procurement practices in terms of shortening them?
Well, I think we have an opportunity, I think, now, David, to be quite honest, from having a look at it. And this is often heard, it's okay for the larger companies, but if you're a smaller SME, how on earth do you do it? And we often hear this story of people just getting fed up with the process and walking away from it. I think there's a couple of things. One, before all this kicked off, was the increasing focus on things, for example, around the Good Employment Charter and the whole rise of social value stuff and one thing and another. And it's certainly something that a lot of the public sector, the procurement authorities were beginning to revisit. But I also think as we come out of this, I think we've obviously got a chance now to seize it and make it a little bit more open for people, because there's a lot of talk around being a little bit more self-sufficient with this. And what's one of the easiest ways you can do that is to make sure that you trade locally within the city region or wherever it may well be. So I think it's certainly something worth visiting again. What that looks like in reality, I'm not too sure, to be quite honest, and I've not heard that much being talked about. But I do think the opportunity is now right for beginning to revisit that with a bit more of a practical way of actually doing it. Let's be honest, things are going to get tough in the next few months, maybe 6 months, 12 months time or whatever it is. We've got to do absolutely everything we can do to make sure that we're protecting businesses and we're making it a lot easier for businesses to get involved in that process.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is that I think that process in terms of revisiting needs to start now, or it needs to start a couple of months ago. I think if we slow out to the blocks, I think we're just going to create a further long tail to this recession. It's really got to happen now.
Yeah. Subra, do you want to just come in on that? I think you just made a comment there around social value.
Yes, thank you, Chris. So we have heard some comments. I was involved with a working group that included Manchester City Council, a couple of the other city councils, Manchester University, and so on. And increasingly, there has been comments and talk about actually doing two things. One is local procurement, so that lead times can be reduced, but also local businesses can be supported, which in turn has got benefits for employment. And the second is incentivizing SMEs who can add social value in a way the corporate sector possibly cannot add in the local area. Generally, I think there has been a move or attempts to move away from low-cost procurement, but I think this is still a work in process. Really, I don't think we are close to having a solution yet. Just one distinction between what kind of items are being procured. So in construction, for example, it is definitely weighted towards larger companies, but whereas for other goods, especially NHS procurement, social care sector, etc., I think increasingly SMEs are in a position to.
He's gone. Subra, are you still there?
Chris?
Hello? I think he may have dropped off. Right, apologies about that, David. We're halfway through a good answer there from him. But I think one of the things I will say is obviously just bear in mind my opening comments around the recovery plan and whatever. One of the key bits around that is economy and communities, and again, this bit fits into that because it's about making stronger communities while making that economy stronger as well. It's a very valid comment, and we'll certainly pick that up and begin to look at it. Totally agree. Now's the right time to be doing this. Don't wait 2 months down the line and see what things really do look like. let's get on with it now. So that's good. Has anybody got any sort of last minutes? Just conscious we've only got a couple of minutes left before we depart. Can't see anybody or hear anything. That's absolutely fine. That's okay.
I've got one, Chris. How often will these forums be taking place?
I was just coming to that, Steve. Thank you very much. It's almost like it's a prompt. Anyway, are you reading my notes? No, as part of the wrap up, I want this to be weekly. It will be weekly, 2 o'clock every Thursday. We're going to be having this, and some weeks we'll probably have a more open forum. Other weeks we just wanted to, impart a bit of information on one thing or another. If we need to run it twice a week, we will do it, whatever. We've never done anything like this on this sort of format, really, but I just think it's quite good just to have that informality and a bit of news, bit of information or whatever. So 2 o'clock every Thursday, we'll be running this session over the next couple of months or however long we need to do that. So look out for information. We'll have different subjects every week, maybe pull in some people and do some short interviews. We may look to extend it a little bit. But that's how we want to run this. And also as well, we will be doing follow-up. If there's anything you want to discuss in the future, let us know. Because again, this is here for you as members, as business. If there's some specific topics that you want to see us cover, please let us know, and we can feed that into to future events as well. So I'm going to have to call a halt to it there. I did say 30 minutes. Thank you very much for your time. Please carry on the conversation afterwards, and obviously, like I said, if there's anything you want us to pick up in the future, any specific issues, please do let us know. This is here for you. Thank you once again. Keep your eyes open for notifications about our other events and the other work we're doing, and please also remember to fill out your business monitor. We're always here for you. Pick up the phone, email us, get in touch with us, and we'll hopefully try and help you out. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.